So that's Gerald Ford. Then you got George Bush, who came on 2001. So the dot-com crash happened. Barack Obama, as you mentioned, this is the worst start to a term for the stock market that is basically self-induced.
This podcast contains the arguably witty banter of two friends, Skippy and Doogles, that like to debate about investing. The content is intended to be entertaining and for informational purposes only, not investment advice. You should do your own research and consult a financial professional before using any of the information in this podcast, and especially before investing.
Welcome, everybody, to the next episode of the Skippy and Doogles Talk Investing podcast, where real investors break down, what do? Bold takes? Call them sharp insights? What do you think we have up in here? Zero fluff? A little bit of fluff. I'm gonna be honest about the fluff. Got a little bit of fluff.
Lots of fluff.
But you got real investors that have real outcomes doing it for you, talking about the economy, talking about business, talking about investing. We're going to get into Ready for that?
You know what I have right now? I have real stickers. I got a whole new batch of Skippy and Doogles Talk Investing stickers. And if you hit that YouTube and subscribe, send us a like, or give us a review anywhere else on every platform under the sun, shoot us an email, skippydoogles.com, and we will send you some stickers. Listen, this is how it works. I don't send one sticker. I don't send two stickers. Actually, I usually send two stickers. But if you're super cool, we might end up sending you 3 stickers.
I don't send one sticker. I don't send one sticker. I don't send two stickers. Oh, actually, no, I do send 2 stickers. I do send that. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Like, super cool.
Loving it. So today, we're going to break down Elon Musk's interview that he just had with Kalo up in Chicha. I got a quiz for Skippy, who you were going to hate this quiz, but it's great. The quiz is great.
Stop saying that. You got to stop.
It's so good. We're going to talk about CEOs are afraid to speak up this Trump administration, but things could be bad for business right now. We're going to talk consumer spending. There's a deficit demo. There's a bucket that Skippy has on his desk. He's talking about a deficit demo. I'm very interested in that. And then we're going to wrap it up with 4 intriguing stock picks. That is today's episode. Hop into it.
Man, I hope we don't run out of time. This could be like 3 hours.
Well, let's get into it then. You want to talk about some Elon Musk right quick?
Yeah, let's go.
All right. So I'm going to play a part of this interview and then get your chaction to it. And by the way, chaction means reaction. Here we go.
And you know how to read an income statement, and you know how to read a balance sheet. You've had some business experience. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
You know about this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, really, I just don't want America to go bankrupt.
So it's a call to action. You're hearing a call to action.
Yeah.
You giving up your other stuff? I mean, how are you running your other businesses?
With great difficulty.
React.
Well, the fun part about with great difficulty is that they did a Tesla commercial on the White House lawn the next day. I don't know if you saw. No, my reaction is empathy, I think. I mean, at least that part of that interview, it seems like his heart is in the right place, which I appreciate. Seems like he cares about the country, which I appreciate. The thing that struck me about that piece of that interview, there's other parts of that interview I don't love, but is you can sense, man, this is challenging. And it's always been challenging because he's trying to run 6 businesses at once or whatever. I mean, I can't even keep track of how many businesses he's the CEO of. It was just a very real cut that I wanted to hear.
You're so empathetic. Oh, my God. Okay, here's the deal. I get that. I think it is hard. Part of it, though, he's making it hard on himself. So I'm going to take one part of that you didn't emphasize. Mm-hmm. I don't want America to go bankrupt. All right. There is we discussed this a hot minute, maybe last week or the week before. There's this posture that's being taken right now that is America's on the brink of disaster. Like, we got to bring it back. Like, we Argentina up in here. No. Like, I'm not saying things are great. You know, I've been talking for a hot minute. We're going to talk a little bit later about the state of the economy right now. And I'm not saying that that's a great thing. But we are acting as if America is going to go bankrupt, which I would say in the near future, there's a 0% chance of.
Doogles, you're jumping ahead here. This is why I have a bucket on my desk with some Monopoly money. This is all about, I'm going to talk you through modern monetary policy. Like, you're jumping ahead.
I'm not jumping ahead. What I'm saying is, when you take the phrase America going bankrupt, it's a phenomenal soundbite. But I just want to educate the people that that's not where we are right now. Actually, can I give a little bit of education right now? You can give some education later about monetary theory. I want to give some education about GDP, gross domestic product, because we had some GDP talk last week. put a YouTube short out there, put a little Instagram out there about that section where we talked about GDP and specifically not having government spending as a part of GDP is something that's being proposed. And a couple of the comments that came through made me realize that folks, understandably, I'd say, don't understand what GDP is and how it's calculated. There was one comment in particular that said something along the lines of, you can't double dip up in here. Like, if the government's spending money, they're just spending our money. You can't. So if it's counted for consumer spending, how you can count as government spending? And that's just not how GDP works. So I'm going to give the smallest little breakdown, highest level breakdown on what GDP is, okay? Because GDP is composed of a few different things. One, government spending. Two, it's business spending, but specifically within businesses, it's spending on like fixed assets and inventory, so stuff that's not sold. And then you got consumer spending, and you have net exports. That's what GDP is. And the biggest part of GDP, and which is why we're going to talk about this a little bit later, is consumer spending. It's like, I actually don't know the percentage, but it's like 85%. It's a huge percentage of what GDP is consumer spending. That's GDP. And so if you're thinking that there's a double dip, if you're talking about government spending, there's not. Like, taxes aren't included in GDP. That's not a part of consumer spending. And so it's not as if we give this money to the government spends the same money, and you're double dipping. That's not it at all. That's not how it's calculated. I just want to educate people.
Yeah. I mean, I told you this in the pre-show meeting. If you're going to try and combat every comment in the Instagram comment section, you're going to have a heart attack soon.
I'm not going to break down every comment. I'm not going to break down every comment. Come on now, silly dilly. Can I go into the quiz, though?
I'm terrified. Yes, go.
It's going to be so good. All right, quiz time. Quiz time. It's going to be so good on the quiz time. You're going to be disappointed in me and frustrated, but I'm going to quiz it anyway. So here's what I did.
Disappointed and frustrated.
Yes. So here's what I did. Because I get curious. Where some of my quizzes come from is I get curious, and then I get so curious that I dive into topics that no one cares about for a while. What I did, because of the state of the stock market right now, which is down, I don't know, 10%-ish, right? Since all-time highs last time. What I did was I looked at the first 50 days and first 90 days of every presidential term in history going back to George Washington.
Ooh, fun.
Okay? So the quiz is this. I'm going to ask you two different things. One, I'm going to ask you, what are the top 5 best performing 50-day terms of all time for presidents, and what are the worst 5? That's what I'm going to ask.
The first 50 days?
First 50 days of a term. So a president could have multiple terms, right? So, but just name the president. First 50 days. So beginning of term, let's start with the best performing. And just throw it out. If you get 2 from each list, so top 5, bottom 5, if you get 2 from each list, I'll be very proud of you.
Okay, so we're going top 5 first.
Top 5. Best performing. 50 day.
50 day. Okay, so we'll start with best performing?
Yeah, best performing.
Okay. Best performing. One, you got to go with my man Taft, followed by Cleveland.
Ooh,
and
love
then you got Clinton's was more at the end of his term rather than the beginning of the term, but I'm going to stick with Clinton. And I think the rest of my picks are bad. How about...
Okay, you've gotten 0 so far, just to be clear.
About
top 5.
My boy, I think the rest of my picks are bad. Let's go Carter.
Okay, great. Okay, so you got 0 for the best. Let's go to the worst.
Okay. Worst. Trump number 2, baby. Round of applause.
Okay, you got 1.
Followed by Johnson and FDR and Bush number 1.
Ooh, okay. So you're much better. This is classic bear mentality for you. You are such a bear that you understand the negatives and don't get the positives.
Conservative value investor over here.
Yeah.
What can I say?
You got 2 of the worst, none of the best. So on the best performing, the number 1 all time, and it's a huge number, is FDR, his first presidency.
Yep.
His first term. So FDR, 35%, first 50 days, 1933. So this is coming off of, you remember,
it's all
Great
time,
Depression.
I'm
just saying. No, I'm just saying. But 35%. Okay. Millard Fillmore, William McKinley, Lyndon Johnson, Harry Truman. That's your top 5.
McKinley, I should have.
You should have nailed McKinley. That was just lame. Okay. Worst. Gerald Ford, George Bush.
Ooh. I could have got
Barack
Gerald
Obama,
Ford. So frustrating.
Donald Trump, Thomas Jefferson. Okay, so that's the 5.
Oh,
All right.
Obama was easy too because
It was
because Bush
So-
signed the emergency bill to be like, you can deal with this problem because it's 2008. Yeah, that was easy.
Easy. The thing is, where Donald Trump, and this is not a political statement. Actually, this has nothing to do with anything. Really, I'm just naming facts here. What's interesting is if you look at Gerald Ford, Bush, Barack, the three that come before what's happening right now, they all became president during a bear market.
Yes.
So this is the
Like right in the middle of the disaster happening.
and disaster. Like Gerald Ford was 1974. The president Nixon had just resigned, and the 1973, 1974, that was a 50% decline in the market. So that happened. Okay, then you got, that's Gerald Ford. Then you got George Bush, who came on 2001. So the dot-com crash happened. Barack Obama, as you mentioned, this is the worst start to a term for the stock market that is basically self-induced. It's very interesting, I think. But anyway, going back to George Washington, it's a fascinating list here. Went back to like John Tyler. I was like, what was going on? Miller Fillmore? What was going on during these times? It's kind of fascinating.
It's super fascinating. So I have very strong opinions about judging the president based on stock performance. Is that it is one of the most idiotic things you can do. The challenge with that, and this is why you don't get really rigid beliefs in your life, is that the first 50 days, the last 50 days here, are a different animal than anything else I've seen in my lifetime, and a different animal than almost I've read about in at least the 1900s. My history back to the 1800s, not so great. I heard about some nonsense happening in 1883 in a book I read this week, which we'll talk about later, which maybe. So this does feel more self-induced than anything else. And without even talking about tariffs, you know how much I hate talking politics. What feels self-induced to this is the uncertainty that comes with this. And businesses thrive on a predictable environment for long-term planning. And the first 50 days have been anything but that. So this is very interesting. I know you have people on multiple sides of this issue, some that will claim that this is a hard reset, and that is good. We're not going to get into that. Others that will say, others that are CFOs and CEOs of companies that say, please just give me some certainty. I actually have a quote on that. I found this fascinating. CFO Journal, Wednesday this week, shows up in my inbox. I read through the Wall Street Journal and go, oh, this is why I don't sleep at night anymore. Here's the quote. It's from Jeffrey Sonnenfeld, the professor at the Yale School of Management. So he hosts a big CEO summit last week, including folks like JP Diamond, Michael Dell, and the CEO of Pfizer. Big names, right? Big deal names. He comes out after this conference and goes on the record and says, there's a universal revulsion against the Trump economic policies. They are also exceptionally horrified about Canada. The article goes on to say, it seems like CEOs aren't ready to speak out just yet. They're waiting for the stock market to crash 20% before they go on the record. That's the whole article. That's what it says. And my plea is, guys, why? Like we were on this podcast when we were on businesses. We know a lot of people that run businesses.
Yep.
It's okay to say it. Like it doesn't. It's not even a political statement to say, listen, it's really hard to run my business right now with the amount of uncertainty that's been put into the economy. It is really hard. It does not make me more optimistic about 2025 and 2026. Why are people afraid to say this?
I mean, you know the answer to that. But Mr. Let's not get political.
Do I?
Mr. Let's not get political. We have to get political to say that. There's a person that's running our country that runs it off of fear. Like that's how he operates. As a leader, this is how what I've come to, decades of leadership, large teams, small teams, etc. What I think is a great indicator of a great leader is if you're going to do a hard reset, I'm going back to that point. You state what's about to happen. I'm going to do this. This is going to happen. I know what's going to happen, and I understand it, and And that gives people certainty.
This is the time frame for how long it's going to take.
Exactly.
These are the milestones that we're going to hit.
When you can't do that, it's much harder for someone to both respect and acknowledge your leadership if you don't tell me what's going to happen ahead of time. And I can tell you right now that that's not what's happening. Like, this is not a predictable situation. This is not, I'm going to lower prices on day one of my presidency, was a thing that was said. And of course that's not going to happen. I think no one really believed that exactly, right? Because that's an impossible thing to do. But that's what businesses need right now. Is if he says, whoever, maybe not him, the Treasury Secretary, whomever, can come out and say, okay, for the first 2 quarters, we're going to do these things. We expect these things to happen. Then starting in Q3, we then will do ... and continue.
Yep.
Then you have some level of predictability or certainty. Whether or not those things end up exactly happening the way you state it, at least it shows that you understand what's going on. And there's not an understanding right now. I think that's the biggest thing that's happening with businesses. You're like, I don't think you get how any of this works.
Okay. Well, listen, JP Diamond's been dodging my phone calls since I'm in favor of work from home Fridays. That's a joke from 6 episodes ago. But I'm just telling business leaders it's okay to say, and it's not a political statement, to say it's really hard to run my business right now. So I would like more people to say that.
It is a political statement. Everything's political right now. Everything is political.
It should not be a political statement. It should be, I am trying to keep my hardworking employees employed. That is not a political statement. It should not be a political
No, do you know why it's political right now? Because the person you're telling that to is not trying to keep their hardworking employees employed.
All right.
Everything is political. I'm just letting you know.
It makes me sad. Okay, what are we talking about next?
Okay, we're going to consumer spending now.
Okay,
we're going to consumer spending. This is a big old topic. Are you cool if I kick this part off, or do you want to kick it off?
Go for it. Yeah.
Okay. This is a big old topic, and I'll tell you why it's a big old topic. There were a few things that to me hadn't quite clicked that make me, I'm not trying to be perma-bear status, but it made me a little bit more afraid than I was before. Something that clicked. So I've been talking for the last couple of years, separate from consumer spending for a second. Last couple of years, I've been having conversations when I talk to like investors in general, VC folks, right, startup folks. And even when we had the conversation, what was it, I think back in September, and when Aileen Lee came on, and she mentioned B2B versus B2C. And investing in B2B for the last 25 years has basically been something that has been more higher from an ROIC, like return on invested capital perspective. And when I've had conversations with other investors, and they've said things to the extent that were kind of like, can you name a big B2C company that has gotten huge, that started in the last 25 years? And there's like a couple, but most of the big companies are B2B, right? Mm-hmm. That's become increasingly a part of the investment philosophy, is like B2B is where the money's at. Now, go back to our GDP conversation we had earlier. What's the biggest part of the economy? Consumer spending. So the biggest places where money's going, biggest investments, biggest return is coming from B2B. Economy, B2C. And the other part, we're going to dive into some of the detail, but the last part that gets me is, and the B2C component is becoming more and more and more centered on a smaller percentage of people.
Yeah, because the wealthiest 10% are doing 50% of the spending.
Exactly, which we talked about last week. Yep. If you put all that stuff together, now let's get into the conversation. That's context. I'm just dropping in context right there. Let's get into the conversation. I thought it was interesting. This Wall Street Journal piece, Consumer Angst is Striking All Income Levels, is the title of this Wall Street Journal piece. This guy, I feel like, had a Jerry Maguire, or whoever wrote this, had a Jerry Maguire moment, like woke up in the middle of the night and started writing down all the bad thoughts, because that came out in this here piece. Manifesto of sorts. So one of the things I'm going to pull out, and then I want you to pull out, but one of the things I'm going to pull out is, in this, he mentions Dollar General, which I'm not invested in Dollar General right now, but I still keep tabs on it. Dollar General had earnings this week, and I was looking at the CEO's statements from that, and the CEO was like, ain't nobody got no monies for even basic necessities. Just FYI, America. Dollar store. I am running a dollar store, and people do not have the money for basic necessities to come into my store where things cost $1. They're a little bit more than that now, but things cost $1 to buy. Huge component. my favorite. This is at the end of the piece. My favorite part, and then I'll let you hop in. At the end, he says, what this means is that consumers generally are less able to absorb shocks, just as uncertainty is soaring.
I'm borderline speechless over here. You don't have to convince me that struggling consumers are strapped for cash. We've seen data points for 3+ years now on exactly that. And there's a self-manufactured shock coming to the economy relating to tariffs and layoffs. So sure. This is all the puzzle pieces fit together on this one. I don't have anything to say.
I was walking down the street with my wife. This is maybe like 2 weeks ago. And we were looking at houses. We were just like, our eyeballs were on the houses, not looking at houses to buy. And a house came up. Like when she's like, oh, look at this house, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, they're going to have to sell it. He goes, what do you mean? You don't even know the people that live in that house. I go, no. All them people are going to have to sell their house. The reason I bring that up is because to react to what you just said, because that's fully accurate, what you just stated, is that Americans have been, quote unquote, strapped for cash for like 3 years or more, but they've kept spending. And I think we're getting close to the point where now they just can't. There's such a, we're going from strapped to cash to like ain't got none's cash.
Well, it was strapped for cash, but the savings balances were the highest ever.
From the pandems.
From pandemic. So there's important nuance there. But I know what you mean.
Yeah. But now I think like the housing market, I'm like, ooh, I'm not a real estate guy, so I don't know. But I'm just like, housing market, if you want to buy a house, wait a little bit. Because people they're going to have to sell their houses. Like people that are in the situation where they go, oh man, but I got that, 2.8, 3% mortgage. I can't, this is not a good time to sell. It doesn't matter if it's a good time to sell. You have to, bro. You're going to have to. People are going to be searching for cash in places. That's my prediction. I'm going to put that in quotes because I know you don't but that's my prediction of where consumer spending is right now. We are not in a good look at the moment.
Yeah, I just can't.
You got nothing else to add?
I can't wait to pull out my bucket and talk to you about how the economy works. That's where I am right now.
I can't wait to pull out my bucket. Well, do you want to pull out your bucket?
All right. So last week I read a breakdown on deficit spending from an investor I really respect who is very conservative but believes in free markets. Recommended this book. I picked up this book thinking there would be a conservative tilt to it because you just said it. You said,
yeah.
He said everything these days is political, and that's one of the things that drives me crazy. Is you look at all the sources. You read person A's article, they say this. You read all their sources, they happen to align with their political beliefs. You read person B articles, you read all their sources, they align with their political belief. I was blown away. The person that wrote this book appears to have opposite political beliefs to the person that wrote the article, which I love. This is amazing.
Yeah, it's great.
This book is by an economist who has worked for multiple administrations in Washington, and they are a modern monetary theory economist. Not even going to tell you which side of the aisle that ends up on, but I want to do an explanation because it's really important. And Doogles, there's a 50% chance of failure. I'm trying to explain the most complex economic model with a little bucket on my desk.
Okay.
So we may have to do this next week. And if it just doesn't register, that's fine. So this bucket is going to represent the U.S. economy, and I basically have some monopoly money here. So if I'm building an economy from scratch, say in the 17th, and I don't control my own monetary policy, the way I get money to spend to build roads, schools, houses, whatever. So I have to go to my citizens. I have to take some of their hard-earned money, put it into the bucket. See this? Put it into the bucket. This is like a household. This is what I'm allowed to spend. Whatever I put in the bucket, I can spend for my economy, right?
Okay. Yeah.
If we fast forward 250 years and we look at an economy like the United Kingdom or Japan or the U.S. that is a currency issuer.
Meaning they print money. They print money. When you say that, you mean they print money.
They have the ability to print money.
Yep.
And if they issue debt, they would not have to issue debt, but if they issue debt, they would issue debt in their own currency. So the scary thing that gets thrown around is Argentina or Greece or these countries that have defaulted on their debt. Let me just cut to the chase and tell you something. They defaulted on debt that they could not print. It's pretty self-explanatory.
Yep.
Argentina defaulted on debt denominated in U.S. dollars.
Yep.
Greece, when they had their debt scare in like early 2010 to 2011, had debt denominated in euros, and they could not print euros. Okay? So now we go back to our bucket, and it's natural for everyone to think that it's 250 years ago, and the only way for government spending to happen is to collect all these taxes from the citizens, put it into the bucket, and then spend that money out. But Doogles, what has happened every year for the past 20 years? We've had, tax collections. I'm going to use like a more real life example. We've had tax collections right here of like $4 trillion, but the government budget has been $5 trillion, and somehow we spent $5 trillion and it didn't really seem to matter. When you control your monetary policy, you can flip that completely on its head. You don't have to fill the bucket first. You have to say, how much are we going to spend? What does the government budget say? And if it's $5 trillion, you print $5 trillion, put that in the bucket. You with me still?
Yeah.
Okay. Then this bucket is the real economy. It is people like you mentioned before. It's me and you if we work for the government. It's me and you who drive on the roads. It's paying for the new high-speed train, paying for the new airports that gets built. It's all those things. So we put $5 trillion into that bucket. At this point, it's natural to say, oh my goodness, we can print money. Why don't we just keep printing money and printing money and printing money? Like, why should we even collect taxes? Because what happens when we put $5 trillion into that is we have to pull some money out, which is taxes, and that circles back to the government. So let's say our government budget was $5 trillion. We only collect taxes of $4 trillion. That means we still have $1 trillion in this bucket, which represents the economy. Yep. Getting pretty complex here. I'm going to take a pause. You with me?
Keep going.
Okay. So the problem with endlessly printing money, as I think everyone understands, is you put too much money into the system and inflation runs out of control. What's fun to talk about in 2025 is
because
we just
inflation, too much money chasing too few goods.
Exactly.
Yep.
Right? We just did that. We had the Biden administration, who I think their economists generally understood the new state of modern monetary theory more than some previous administrations, but they took it a little too far. They said, we want a little too much money to flow into this bucket, and we're not going to take quite enough out. Okay. Now, so the important thing to think about is whenever a currency issuing body like the U.S. government, like the Bank of Japan, prints money to initially fund the economy, what people who want a zero deficit are asking is they're asking for $5 trillion to go into the bucket, $5 trillion to come out of the bucket in taxes. The U.S. has done this before. The U.S. has done this 6 times in our history, and it's done it as recently as
the 90s.
I think the year 2000, 98 through 98, 99, and 2000. Yep. The Clinton administration ran not even a balanced budget. They ran a government surplus. Okay. Right. The reason I have this stupid bucket on my desk is because a government surplus means the U.S. government puts $5 trillion into the bucket and takes $5.2 trillion out. You know where that extra $200 million came from? It came from the citizenry of your country. And it actually, in that case, and in all the previous other cases, led to an economic recession and a significant market pullback because you took oxygen out of the economy. So a government surplus often sounds like a good thing because of the way we use the words and the way we think of government spending like a household, which it's obviously not because my household, your household, cannot manufacture dollars to buy a bigger house or to buy more cars if we want. Okay, so I'm going to take another pause. Yep. A lot of complex issues I tried to refine into a bucket. You still with me?
Yes, this is tell me if you don't want this much commentary, but this is the place where I think the 5 whys becomes very helpful. So if someone says, we need to balance the budget, we need surplus, I go, why?
You're asking for me to answer that? No,
yeah, and then they answer, and I go, oh, why? But right now, I don't think people can answer 1 why, let alone 5. Like if you say, what's the big thing that you want to happen? Why? Okay, why? Now, what they can is the micro. The micro, I think folks are like, I want food on the table. I get that. That's like, that's straightforward. That's the end. But when you try and connect it to the macro, to the points that you're laying out, like, I think it's really hard for people to be like, oh, why? And many of the answers to why are likely falsehoods about how things work. Like, I don't want America to go bankrupt.
Yeah. So this is the larger point. America cannot go bankrupt. Now
0%.
0% chance. It's actually impossible unless we willingly chose to bankrupt on our debt. Because what's missed here is that when the government issues debt, that goes to buyers like you and me who hold
in China.
No, it goes to a lot of places. And then they choose to pay interest on that debt. They actually wouldn't have to. But that's a much more complex thing that we're not going to talk about today. The reason I brought out the bucket is because, yes, based on the sheer mechanism of how things work, it's impossible to default on our debt. The problem is that if people truly understand that game, there's a psychological problem that happens. Humans want to think of government debt as a household because they're familiar with that household. And if deficits are so extreme that they don't make any sense, and the numbers are so large that people can't follow them, it's natural for people to lose faith in the value of that currency. So what's really happening, and what's happening with the current administration and Musk role in the current administration, I totally understand it. It's reasonable because it feels like the deficit has gotten so out of control, and there's no desire to ever even pretend for a year or two that we're going to balance the budget, that people's brains are breaking, right? They're breaking because they say, I can't run my household like this. So I am not advocating for, and I don't think anyone is advocating for, ridiculous government deficits that run into perpetuity and never pull back to faith. I argue just psychologically, you have to have a few years where you feel like you pay down the debt or anything else, because the human brain cannot handle that because their personal budget doesn't work this way. But what has happened the last 6 times the U.S. government has run a federal surplus is we've had a significant economic slowdown that leads to a recession that has been very tough to come back from. So the reason I'm giving this history lesson is because I think those important facts are so lost right now. They're so misunderstood. And I understand why they're misunderstood, because it's a very tough concept. But man, we need there's some middle ground here, right? And I'm just asking for people to potentially consider the middle ground. I won't even talk about the book, Doogles. I'm waiting for you to read this book, and then we can fully break it down. Not even mention it by design, but I hope you had a little fun with the bucket.
Yeah, I did have fun with the bucket. And I think your overall point around the disconnect between the facts of how things work and what's happening from the narrative is a very, very important one.
Well, and no one, even though, I don't know, I don't expect everyone to follow my talking points there, I don't think anyone thinks that laying off tens of thousands of government workers making average salaries, you can argue that that's necessary and that it's good, but I don't think anyone thinks that's great for the economy over the next 6 months, right? It's a pretty obvious thing. It doesn't matter where the jobs come from. If real money is associated with those jobs, and a lot of that money evaporates from our economy, and our economy, you just talked about GDP, is run by consumer spending, there will be a lot less consumer spending.
Yes, that's what you just stated is true. But if you want to eliminate inflation, it's actually the best thing you can do. Have no one have any jobs, so there's no spending, and then cut all the government spending. There's actually going to be no inflation. Is that not? I mean, it's kind of like if you have a disease, just drink bleach and you won't have the disease anymore. It's very similar.
Deep breaths over here. I understand what you're saying. No,
it is true.
No, do you know the recent talking points in Q1, basically quarterly conference calls for earnings for Fortune 500 companies? Do you know the amount of times that soft landing was said? It's about 1/20th as frequently as it was said just last quarter. So, yeah, soft landing seems to be taken off the picture. The general point is pretty obvious. We've gone from wondering if we navigated a soft landing to being pretty dang confident we have not softly landed here.
Because we are operating in textbook ruin an economy land. Textbook. Maybe I shouldn't say that because no textbook has actually laid this stuff out. This is not a contemplated scenario. But if you ask someone, how would you eliminate growth from an economy? Mm-hmm. Well, take away people's ability to spend, like the thing that leads to growth. If you did say the one positive is if you said, how do you eliminate inflation? I think the taking away of all the jobs is the way to do that. The only issue is the increasing price. Like, you're directly increasing prices. So, like, that's the only issue with eliminating the inflation point if the tariffs actually go through. If they don't, though, if the tariffs don't really stick, they're not long term, then it ends up in a case where really you're just going back to ruining the economy.
I need to move on. I'm tapping out.
Well, but you is it because you think I'm going political? I'm not trying to go political.
No, I know. Like, it's such a shame that it's hard to talk about this stuff without people interpreting it as political. You're exactly right. Yeah.
No, it's not.
Get rid of a bunch of jobs and make goods more expensive. Nothing positive from an economic perspective happens.
Nothing. I mean, yeah, that's why if you eliminate all the meta tags connected to anything, and you go, what is inflation? Increasing prices. What is a tariff? Increasing prices. Therefore, you cannot, like, those two things can't go together. That's just like no matter who's doing it, like, that's just kind of a fact.
Yeah.
But if you eliminate people's complete ability to spend, because ain't got no jobs, then great, no more inflation. Like, that's perfect.
Fun times. Perfect. Anything else in the fishbowl?
We do for premium listeners. So we're going to wrap it up. If you're listening, we love it. We love it, love it. But the last few minutes in here is going to be for premium subscribers. You can go to skippydoogles.supercast.com to hit up on our premium. We're going to talk about some intriguing stock picks for the last few minutes. So become a premium subscriber. For everyone else, thank you for listening. skippydoogles.com. All your needs, skippydoogles@gmail.com for listener mail. We love your listener mail. Please send it in. And see you next week. Premium subscribers,
Peace.
Stick around.